Annalise, outside of this family, outside of our family, who do I like the most?
Trump.
Now, do you know what happened to him yesterday?
What?
Somebody shot him.
What does shot mean?
They fired a gun at him.
What?
They fired a bullet at him. You've seen a gun before, right? On television?
No, she had not. Maybe way too early to introduce the idea of political violence to my 4-year-old daughter. But she knows me. She knows who I like, even love. You love him too. President Trump, huh? He's never let us down. It's amazing. It's an amazing time to be alive and what he went through. But I got to tell you something. I am worried about this campaign. I am worried about how he's doing. I'm worried for his safety. I think Kamala Harris poses a very serious threat, and a total reset is needed immediately by President Trump and his team. I am not a political expert, but I do have some ideas, and if they're wrong, fine. But something has to happen. I do think, though, I have a special credibility when it comes to President Trump. You know, I first met him briefly when I was in high school, and I didn't know him well over the years, but we all know Donald Trump. Through a couple of things that happened, I happened to be in the room when he declared for president, July 16th, 2015, coming down that escalator. Basically, my co-anchor at the time, I was working at another TV station, was very friendly with Michael Cohen. And she said, something's going on at Trump Tower. Do you want to come? Sure, why not? So here we are, waiting for the speech to start. That guy circled, that's me. And something happened. President Trump spoke for about an hour. He spoke about how America doesn't win anymore. And it hit me right here. This man is right. He understands us. This isn't silly. This isn't some reality TV show. This is real, and he can win.
I think he might be a game changer in this race. Listen to that speech. It's going to go over well in certain precincts in Iowa, New Hampshire. This is a big deal. This is not a joke.
New York Times, the Daily News, everybody, the Politico people, they all thought it was a joke. And they actually made fun of me. That's Access Hollywood. Billy Bush making a big deal about my opinion, making fun of me. But I knew I was right. And I think I'm right now. What I'm hearing from the Trump people, Trump world, is that they're very unhappy right now. And there is perhaps buyer's remorse when it comes to J.D. Vance. Now, in my book, J.D. Vance is awesome, and I think he's going to be a great vice president. The problem is not J.D. Vance. His little thing can be dealt with the Tucker Carlson interview and the rest. That can be handled. The larger problem, in my opinion, is that President Trump, this is going to sound a little bit conventional, like old world politics, but he has not pivoted from a primary campaign to a general election campaign. I know that's like a textbook from 50 years ago, and maybe it sounds obsolete, but a couple of things happened. The RNC convention, his speech, accepting the nomination, awesome. The first 20 minutes, when he told us all about how he was shot and what happened, and Corey, and he kissed the helmet, it was beautiful. But then he did something that we have seen before. He gave a rally speech to his base. A lot of people were watching that night, and I don't think he was talking to them. And it's time to start talking to people who don't like him, to people who are committed against him, because these folks are victims of fake news. They have been lied to. I love the rallies, right? They're great. We've all seen the rallies, haven't we? But they're kind of, I don't know, are they getting stale? A little bit. We love them, but are they changing any minds? I know he loves them. I have my doubts about their effectiveness, and I have a few ideas for a change. Now, so he's doing the rallies, and he's also showing up at forums. The National Association of Black Journalists yesterday, you may have seen my show last night. I defended him from beginning to end. He was right. He was right on the substance. He was right about Kamala Harris and her ambivalence about her race. Actually, he was totally right. And let's just get that out of the way. Kamala Harris in 2019, responding to that very question, what are you?
African American woman, but you're also Indian American, and I'm just curious.
Indeed.
What's the best? How do you describe yourself?
Did you read my book? How do I describe myself? I describe myself as a proud American.
Okay. She's uncomfortable with that question. For what reason, I don't know. And actually, I don't care, and I don't think President Trump should either. Look, somehow they have made this silly woman seem presidential. This is serious, and they might be able to fool the American people. There are just 3 full months. It's August 1st, August, September, October, and then it's the election. They could actually, I can see it happening, they fool the American people. So others have mentioned this, that he should only talk about the issues. Now, I got to admit, when I hear that, I think it sounds boring, right? It does. Policy, somebody says you got to just talk about policy. And in the old days, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, it did sound a little bit dry. And dirty little secret about the media, they hate talking about policy. No, they just love the gossip, the palace intrigue, who's up, who's down. What did somebody say yesterday? Oh my gosh, it's the silly stuff. The issues right now are so important and so fascinating, and the issues, I know this, you know this, I don't want him to talk about anything about Kamala Harris. She's not worth it. She's just a puppet. These issues, every single thing, he cannot let up ever. Kamala Harris, who is she? What does she represent? Back to the rally. I think I just might have a little bit of PTSD. See, every time I see him at these rallies, quite frankly, you know what I think of? I think of the time he was shot, and I fear that it could happen again. Haven't you had that feeling? I mean, it's the same thing. It's the same environment. It's where it happened.
Something that said, take a look at what happened.
Terrible, absolutely terrible. But in the middle of all that terror, he gets up, and it's time to fight, 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 right? We'll never forget that. Only he could do that. All right, you got to fight. You got to fight. But you have a different opponent, Kamala. And she's poised to fool a lot of people about herself and about President Trump. Here's my first idea. I don't want President Trump going to too many more of these rallies. Do you remember the RNC in 2020? He met with these small groups in the White House. Now, they were Trump supporters, but he was awesome with them. Awesome. At home, treated them with respect, whether they were a garbage collector or the CEO of a company.
These are the incredible workers that helped us so much with the COVID. We can call it many different things, from China virus. I don't want to go through all the names because some people may get insulted, but that's the way it is. These are great, great people, doctors, nurses, firemen, policemen. We want to thank you all. You have been incredible.
And he talks to them, and he gets to know them, and the people watching get to know them. What if he did that with undecided voters? I think he could win them over. And maybe not the ones in the room, but people watching. I know he can do it. I'll show you how he's done it before. Also during that convention, this happened.
Today, you have also accepted the profound duties and responsibilities that come with American citizenship. By swearing the oath of allegiance, each of you has entered a sacred and unbreakable covenant with our nation. You have pledged your undying loyalty to the American people, the American Constitution.
This is what the left does not want Americans seeing, that President Trump is at ease with all people, treats all people with respect, treats all people equally. It doesn't matter. Just like it says in James in the Bible. I think this is the first time I'm actually quoting James. James II, actually. The same thing. He embodies that. It doesn't matter if you're rich or poor. How about this? John Ponder and the FBI agent who arrested him in the White House.
2 years ago, I was honored to tell John Ponder's story of transformation in the Rose Garden on the National Day of Prayer. Today, I'm thrilled to welcome him back to the White House. John's life is a beautiful testament to the power of redemption. At the age of 38, he was arrested for bank robbery. While John was in prison, he began reading the Bible and listening to Christian radio. One day he heard Reverend Billy Graham on the radio proclaim, "Jesus wants to be Lord of your life." On that day, John dedicated his life to Christ.
So that's great stuff. Now, Donald Trump mixes it up on CNN. When CNN has a town hall, he'll go, right? And there'll be questions from the audience. And, everybody has a good time, and there's some controversy, and he wins, and some say he loses, whatever. What if, instead of the big rallies, the Trump campaign started? I mean, I know they can do this. If they can produce this, they can produce a small gathering and televise it with people who don't necessarily like him. You know who did that? A friend and neighbor of Donald Trump, the late, great Richard Nixon. In 1968, he did this very thing. They called it the New Nixon. It was very innovative. Roger Ailes produced the whole thing, another friend of Donald Trump. He'd stand in the arena. There'd be a couple of journalists, but mostly regular people. And they'd ask him whatever they wanted.
Mr. Bittner.
Mr. Nixon, because of the recent widespread demonstrations and disruptions on American campuses, there seems to be quite a bit of public pressure now on campus administrators to get tough and to crack down on the student rebels. What is your view in general on the role of dissent in society, and in particular, the role of dissent on the college campus?
I'm for it. I'm for dissent because as I look back over the 190-year history of this country, as I'm sure you have as a student at Ann Arbor, I find that dissent is the great instrument of change. It's the instrument of progress.
You know, people were shocked when they heard that answer. What? He's for dissent? How can that be? Now, of course, he said, it's got to be peaceful. You got to obey the law. But that showed a new Nixon. And also this, I think this is a message from President Nixon to President Trump.
Mr. Monroe.
Mr. Nixon, you spent 8 years in Washington as Vice President of the United States, right? And then you lost in an election as President of the United States. You lost in an election in California. And today, the Republican Party and your campaign managers is telling us about a new Nixon. What's the difference between the new Nixon and the old Nixon?
Well, Mr. Monroe, the new Nixon is a little older. He doesn't have quite as much hair, as my wife points out from time to time up here. But on the other hand, I think perhaps the best answer to that question is that when an individual in politics or in education or in the business of writing for newspapers, when he ceases to grow, when he ceases to change to meet the changing conditions, then you can be sure that he no longer is going to be living with the generation of which he is a part.
If he ceases to grow, if he ceases to change. President Nixon was an admirer of President Trump. They were actually neighbors for a period of time. Mrs. Nixon thought that President Trump had great presidential possibilities, and so did Richard Nixon, to actually put that in writing in a couple of letters. Isn't that fascinating? I think it's great. So, what do you think? The Great Reset. I like it. Don't you? And he doesn't have to do it solo. How about some people who could back him up? Caitlyn Jenner. Now, Caitlyn Jenner happens to be trans, right? But here's the thing with Caitlyn Jenner. We agree. MAGA agrees with Caitlyn Jenner. She's MAGA. Caitlyn Jenner doesn't think this should happen to children under the age of 18 without parents' consent. That is insane, and that's what the left represents. That John Ponder guy we talked about, how about him emceeing an event with undecided people? Or those women he met at Chick-fil-A in Atlanta. This man is a leader, and the left doesn't want folks to know it. The left doesn't want anybody to know about his heart. His heart was on display. Sometimes it gets out. The mainstream media, they slip.